All right, y'all, how's it going? I've been asked in my last few videos a couple times about what my dragging setup is since I've been doing I've been dragging quite a bit more during this time of year. It's actually the preferred method to find these fish. So I figured I'd hop on here real quick, do a quick video on what my setup is and kind of the reason why I do it and things like that. So I'll just go on and get started. The biggest thing is that everybody's asking what line and what pound test stuff. Okay, so I only use Berkley Big Game, and there is a bunch of good line out there on the market, and a lot of it's great line, and I've used a large portion of it. But the thing is, I just ever since I was young, or since they've been making this stuff, I've used it and I've had great success with it, and they have only actually gotten better over the years. I dare say that they're probably some of the better lines on the market. Which I do know there's some other stuff that is better, so don't get me wrong. I'm just, for my budget, how often I fish, how often I've got to change it, I use Berkley Big Game. I use a 40-pound, this is 40-pound test main line. That's what I use. And then I buy their big roll of 80-pound test, which the clear that I use for my leader line. And so far, I haven't had any problems with it. I've used it from 20-pound test all the way up to, like I said, 80-pound test, and I haven't had an issue with any of it. So that's the line that I use. But like again, I say that there's a bunch of good line that's on the market. It's just that the price point, you can't beat it. When I'm getting a 5,000 yard roll of this stuff for shipped to the door about $90. Okay, so do your price comparison to some of the other stuff. Here lately, I've been able to fish. I fish sometimes 4 or 5 days a week, just because that's what I do now. So I got to change this line, because you get hung up. When you stretch, I don't care what kind of monofilament you use. If you get hung up, and let's say you have to break off or something like that, well, you stretch this line, you'll notice that in time it'll actually start getting thinner in diameter. If you really pay attention to it, you'll see that. And then once I give it about three or four times, I got to break it, and I'm changing that line. That, and like I said, I fish so much to cast to retrieve. The sun, I don't care what line you're using, but the sun really wreaks havoc on your line. It really does. And what I like about this they call this a solar collector, is that you'll actually start to see this fade. So again, that's with other line, but when I start seeing it fade, I change it. Because you can have the best rods on the market, you can have the best reels on the market, you can have the best hooks on the market, but it means absolutely nothing if this is not right. So yeah, I want to go over that. So basically, I'll start off with my setup. So as you've seen in my other videos, which I started using this rubber bead here on the end because I was, I was complaining, because if I just had my knot there, when I'm dragging, I would get, if it'll focus, anyway, but I would get nicks on the swivel itself. So when I would go to tie a new knot, there'd be little burrs on the end of this swivel. And so as that line, rotates on that swivel like that, well, it's actually cutting the line. And I had that happen to me when I went to lift the fish over the side of the boat. It broke right there. Luckily, he was already over the side of the boat, and I got him. So anyway, so when I talked about that, there was a bunch of suggestions that said, hey, which it should have been obvious. I don't know why I didn't think of it, but they said, get like a silicone or a rubber bead. I think these are silicone beads. But now what I do is I'll take it after, I know it's not focusing. This camera's weird sometimes, but I'll take where my knot is, and then I'll take that silicone bead, but then I'll go a little bit further, and I'll just I'll pull it over the knot, so that way, it doesn't move back. It's there. So if I'm going through rocks or whatever and it hits it, well, it's going to hit that silicone bead first. Very great suggestion. All y'all that suggested that to me, which it should have been like a no duh type thing for me, but either way. Okay, so I use these three-way swivels. There's a bunch of them out there. It really doesn't matter what three-way swivel you use. I would say get a durable one. You don't want to go with a small swivel because they're just weak. But I'd use a small swivel, or a three-way swivel, then I put a snap on the third end there. Now the snaps that I use, everybody keeps asking about the snaps that I use, and it's these here. I mean, I get them from Amazon. So they're basically just, you know, regular sinker slides, and all I do is I just cut this plastic piece off because I don't use sinker slides. I want them. Now you can get this pack. I think it's 100 in here. I think that's what it is. But you get 100 of these off of Amazon for, I think I paid like 11, 12 bucks for these. I think it's what it is. And I know I could get just the regular, you know, the metal snap itself, and it might be a little bit cheaper. But this I bought a bunch of these, so I mean, I got them, so I'm going to use them. But anyway, so yeah, I do that. Like I said, I got, you know, main line, I got the silicone bead, got my three-way swivel, and then the leader. Okay, so on the leader, again, a lot of questions about that. My leader length, I usually run about, it's roughly about 38 to 40 inches long, and some may think, well, that's kind of long, but I use this regardless. Like, this is the size length of leader line that I use the entire year, summer, winter, fall, spring, it doesn't matter. Whether I'm dragging, whether I'm anchoring, it's the same exact leader that I use. Because the whole point that I did starting off doing all this stuff was I wanted to make all of this as simple as possible, right, for me. And I found out that if I just leave it that same length, it's fine. I've done good fishing structure with it. I've done good, like I said, anchor fishing, done great with it. Dragging, you know, it just works all around for me. And it's also worked really well in different places too. But my basic setup is, as you all know, my 10-aught triple threat whisker seeker hook, by far the best I've used. You know, I see a lot of people out there that use all kinds of different hooks, and that's great. Whatever works well for you, keep doing it. But I know these here have worked awesome for me. You can check the link in the description too if you decide to get some of these and save you 15%. Then I get these floats. I get them from Ironside Catfishing. He's coming out with a couple new colors. He sent me some the other day that are real cool. I'll show them off. I'll show them off here soon once I get some other stuff in the mail. But yeah, I usually run that I start off running that about 4 inches above the hook. You know, and it does well. The only thing I don't like about these is, which I have gotten some bigger ones he sent me. Let me see if I can find one real quick. Yeah. So I've gotten some bigger ones he had sent me, so you can see the size difference, right? So these ones will hold up quite a bit more. Because what I do sometimes, especially with if you ever notice the rod that I have down the center of my boat, which is typically my wife's rod anyway, but I like running big heads. You know, if I got a good skipjack or if I got a good white bass, I like running the big head on there. I don't know, I always want to have at least one big bait out there for sure, which I have a couple, but I think I'm going to start bumping up to these bigger floats because these ones, they do a great job on like the section pieces that I use and some of the other stuff that I use. They work great. They hold it up just fine. But when I put out I'm using a head that's probably about that big, and so I think I might have to start moving to these, because what that does is it just, the float is irrelevant at that point. So it's just basically just dragging the ground and I'm getting hung up, which I do a lot, and it kind of upsets me, especially when I got a prime piece of bait out there, then I got to break it off. But yeah, that's it. Okay, so I'll go back to the leader length also. What I love about using floats as opposed to, say, the rattles or the spooks or whatever, is that if I'm anchor fishing, and let's just say that I know the fish are buried, they're just buried in the mud. Now, I don't like my bait sitting in the mud, but what I can do is I can take that float on the fly before I make the cast, and I can pull this through. So now, if it's sitting here, now my bait is closer to the bottom without sitting on the bottom. So I just like having that ability. I can lengthen and shorten that. I could raise or lower my hook off the bottom, like I said, on the fly, because there's some days that I'll start off dragging. There's some days that, once I get done with that, I'll find me a spot or I'll come across brush. That's some things that I do when I'm dragging is I'll notice that I come across, let's say, or coming up to a big brush pile or I just happen to catch it before all my rods get to it, you know, and I want to fish it. So I'll spot lock the boat, reel all my rods in, and then I'll play with this if I have to. Then I'll make the cast out there, and I may sit on it for 30 minutes, then get above it or get past it, and I'll go back to dragging. I do that sometimes too, not all the time, sometimes. Okay, but outside of that, like I said, I got this. I typically run just this setup, but I do have 2 rods where I put these little rattles on. And the only thing I do with those is nothing special. I used to try to use some bobber stops and stuff like that to keep them, but I just put them on just like that because because they float. So when everything's angled down to your swivel, well, this is going to float up. Well, these are naturally going to want to float to your float. So that's what I do sometimes. I run 2 rods that has these rattles on them. Big question is, does it help? Does it create anything? Does it do anything different? I don't know. I'll tell you my last fishing trip, all the fish I caught come off to both rods that had the rattles on it, to the point where I was almost going to put rattles on all the rods. But that, I didn't have a whole lot of time with that trip, so I never got around to doing it. And then as far as, dragging weights, like, okay, so these are, John Bubba New makes these. He calls these his magic sticks, and they're really cool weights. Now, what I will say is that there is a place for a stick style weight just like this one, and there is a place for the slinky style weights like Carolina Lake Weights makes and stuff like that, and a couple other people make them. I don't, to sit here and tell you what's best in every situation, I can't give you that, because I've lost plenty of these and I've lost plenty of the slinky weights. So I can't tell you the best way. Now, when I like using these is when I guess when I'm going through, we'll say new stretches of water, new sections of water. The reason for that is this weight here, or this type of, I'll call it a stick weight because it doesn't flex and it's not going to, you know what I mean? So I can get a better read off the bottom. And I know I've went over this before in a couple of my videos, but if the weight, like if it's in rock, okay, so it's going to come across rock and it will kind of hang up a little bit, then it's going to pop free. It's just the nature of the beast with these. If I'm going through gravel, I'll be, the feedback to my rod tip, especially the one that's down the center, because I have no planer board on it. And that, like I said, if I watch the rod tip kind of doing this, okay, I know it's kind of like it's going to be like a gravel bottom, possibly a shell bed, but it's going to be a harder bottom. And if it's a slick mud bank or bottom, this is just going to kind of drag. Every now and again it may stick and then pull free. If it's a real rocky bottom, like if you got bigger chunk rock, well, you'll see it because it'll hold, it'll pop free, and you'll see it go back down and hit, and then it'll hold, it'll pop free. It's just it coming over bigger rocks. And then, like I said, sometimes this will get wedged in rocks. That's one of the bad things about it. As opposed to the slinky style weight, you really can't read the bottom a whole lot. But it does work. It'll get you through the structure. I'm not going to say better, but it does work well when you're in pretty heavy structures. I run both style weights. It just depends on where I'm fishing. If I'm fishing a new area, if I'm fishing a new stretch of water, I'm going to stick to these if I really want to know what the bottom is. And that's key. I went over my videos before, that is key. Because if you catch a fish in that area, or if you catch multiple fish in that area, that'll give you a better idea what you need to relate more to as far as your bottom. You can sometimes tell in areas what type of bottom it is just using your graph. But if you pay attention using, like I said, a good stick weight like this, it'll really give you that good feedback you need to know. And it's worked. Like I could actually go to a spot, and let's say using that, I can drag that area, and I can know, okay, well, once I got past this point, it was more of a gravel bottom, or once I got past this point, it was more of like a boulder, big rock area. And then, of course, slick mud banks they're fairly simple to figure out. Or they don't have to be mud; they could be a sand bottom too. So you just got to kind of, because a mud bottom, once you reel it in, if you're lucky enough, you'll have like right here, it'll be stuck to the bottom of it. You'll see it. But if it's a sand bottom, you really won't. You'll just see a bunch of smooth scratches on the outside of these. So they have their place. I mean, they really do. And like I said, I run both weights. If it's a spot that I fished before and I know it has a lot of structure in it, I'm going to lean towards the slinky style weights just because they're just a touch better on structure. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, I mean, of course, you got your planer boards. I've got, you know, of course, everybody knows I run Spreadums now. You know, again, me and Wes come up with this color scheme on this, and they're really good boards. But again, there's a bunch of good boards on the market, and I also have a video on how you can make your own if that's something that you know you guys want to pursue. And I also got a video on how to make your own dragon weights if you want to do that. They're more of a, like I said, they're kind of a stick style weight, and they used to work real well. But yeah, that's I guess that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I just wanted to get on here and kind of go over that because I've been asked that a few times, and I've been asked to do a little video on how I set this stuff up. And it's, you know, it's an evolving thing. You know, you get out there, you do it, you figure out what works for you in your area, the type of water you fish, because you know, a lot of this stuff, current plays a big role as well. You know, a lot of people that fish lakes and, you know, a lot of still water, well, they're getting away with you know, running 1.5 to 2.5 ounce weights, where me, I start off running 5 ounces, you know, and then I let the current determine what I go to from there. Because I'll go to, you know, 5 ounces, 6 ounces, even up to 8 ounces on some days. It just depends on the current itself. But 5 ounces is my go-to. That's what I start with. I do have some 4 ounces on them days that it's really, really steel. Well, I wanted to say this too, because a lot of people don't take this to account also. It's line drag, okay? So if you're fishing a river, so we'll even go back to, you know, what I was saying about this float, okay? So if you're fishing a river and you're pulling, we'll say you're pulling 0.5, okay? So you've got that speed you got to account for. All right, so if you've got let's say you've got I don't know, up to a 1 mile an hour current, right? Well, now you got to add that in. So now you're pulling these against a 1.5 mile an hour current. We'll just put it that way, because the current this way and the speed you're going against it. So that creates a lot of line drag, right? So when you take into account, so if you're fishing probably 20, 30 foot water, it's probably not that big of a deal. But if you start getting into that 50, 60, you know, closer to 70 foot water, that's a lot of line out there. And so that 5 ounce weight or that 4 ounce weight or whatever weight you were using before may not be enough to account for that line drag, right? So you may have to run a heavier weight, which I found myself doing that, you know, well, here early, like a couple weeks ago, we had, you know, up to a 2 mile an hour current, and I was dragging it, you know, because I know that was the best way to find fish, especially, you know, this time of year post spawn, or we were just kind of getting into the post spawn, and the fish were just scattered, they were everywhere. So, I mean, to sit and fish one area, okay, you may get lucky, you may not, but I knew the best way to find them is to cover water, and that's, you know, dragging baits. But anyway, so I started off in like 35 foot of water. I was using 5 ounces of weights, and it was going pretty good. I could see that I was still maintaining contact with the bottom. Well, then I started dumping off into holes where I was in 60 foot of water, wasn't even touching bottom. So I had to go from 5 ounce all the way up to 8 ounces of weight just to get it to where I could, you know, I could work through that hole there. And then of course, once I got back up out of it, then I was definitely on the bottom. So, you know, you just got to kind of take all that into account, because a lot of that factors into, one, what weight, what size weight, how big a float you need, you know, things like that. So it's just a bunch of little things that, you know, you got to play around with and figure out what works for you. I could sit here, you know, and tell you all day long, well, this is my setup, whatever. Give it a try. I mean, it may work for you, or you may find something different that works better. And if you do, please let me know, because I like learning things just as much as the next guy. But anyway, I think I've covered most of that. I'm sure if you have any more questions, hit me up in the comments. I'll be glad to answer them. But with all that being said, I appreciate you watching this one, and I'll catch you in the next one.